Folks, being that this is an off week in terms of videos, I want to continue pull things out of some interesting parts of the library and show you some stuff I've got here. Give me a chance to set some stuff up I haven't played with for ages, like in this case my PC Engine CoreGrafx. This was one of the first systems I had to pack away in shifting to working from home in our current circumstances, and so I wanted an excuse to pull it out, and I thought doing a little video sort of walking through the system, some of the games I've got for it, might be a nice little treat to watch. Anyway, so the CoreGrafx is a 1989 revision, so it came out 2 years after the original PC Engine. The big thing, alongside the styling change, going from the classic white and red design of the original to this, with this sort of grey, black, and blue text, is first thing is the addition of an AV output. The original PC Engine only did RF, so if you were trying to collect one now, you'd find you'd only be able to connect it to a TV, a multi-system TV that could only do that. With the CoreGrafx, you only get composite. Here's the standard composite video cable, 5-pin DIN, composite video output. And that was a pretty big improvement on the time, of course. And so, it's basically the same system. It has a slightly tweaked version of the processor, which fixes some sound bugs. And what's interesting is they rolled back on it with the CoreGrafx 2, which came out a little bit later, which kept the same sort of black, slightly different mold for that top piece, and used orange accents. Of course, you have a matching controller, and like with many PC Engine things, there are many controllers that are accented. I like the blue, black, grey aesthetic this console has. It's sort of nice, and it sort of fits really well in my book compared to, say, the original white PC Engine is nice looking, but of course, in this day and age, you've got to deal with plastics and whatnot. So of course, you've got the base controller it comes with its nice little short cable and its classic tiny DIN plug that you plug into the front of the console. I don't have a multi-tap. I really need to get one, if only for completeness sake, but I expect it's really only going to be me. I mean, I also do have a second pad, but it's one of the NEC Avenue pads, the 6-button one. I picked this up. This is actually basically, unused in box. So, problem is, the only real game supports 6-button is Street Fighter, and it does fit in the hand a little nicer. I really should give that a bit more of a whirl, but I just am more or less happy with the original 2-button pad. Again, especially because most of the games I play on it, they're games that are pretty much designed around the 2 buttons. One of the main reasons I got the PC Engine was really to play a lot of shooters. I actually first encountered it back in the 90s during the days of emulation, when I got introduced to Magic Engine, which I'm sure anyone who was around emulating old stuff in the 90s would remember. And I remember playing a lot of the conversions. I really love the conversion of Outrun on this. I don't have an actual HuCard of it, but that version of Outrun is one of the best ones until Sega put the Ages releases on Saturn, and MAME could handle System 16 and the Superscaler boards and all of that. So at the time, the PC Engine was probably one of the best home version you could play. It's a great machine like that. And of course, like I said, I have a small HuCard collection. But of course, in this day and age, you're not limited to what you can physically get. And so I usually really put a lot of time, I need to pull the camera out a bit. Terra Onion's Super SD System 3, which is, of course, basically a flash card, which plugs on the back. So the big thing is, it's the only device out there that actually lets you run CD games. So the way this works is, let's pull it out, the box on the side. There's on the side, so yeah. And so the idea is, there's the actual unit itself, and it looks like there's a couple of add-ons. I think there's like a memory bank add-on back in the day for the original console that it looks like. Anyway, so you pull the old back cover off the expansion port, and then you mount it as so. And the thing is, this looks really good against the grey of the CoreGrafx, if you ask me. So we sit that down. And so, essentially, what this gives you is, the first thing is an RGB video output. Oh, let's get that in the light. There we go. And thankfully, one of the things about it that's really nice is that is a standard Mega Drive 2 video port. So, the way, and so it gives you RGB and comms and whatnot. So, I of course use a trusty Retro Computer Shack Mega Drive 2 SCART cable. And I use that, plug that to my RetroTink or my FrameMeister or whatever. And that's how I captured the footage you're going to see next. I really have been meaning to do some PC Engine stuff on the channel. But I sort of, most of my collection is shooters, so I'll save you for a Schmucktember, if you will. But the Super SD system is a really good bit of hardware. Because again, so you've got the RGB output, you've got the ability to run HuCard games and CD games. So a lot of my experience when I was messing around with emulation was really just HuCard games. There weren't, of course, any. I didn't really know about the CD emulation at the time, the CD drive and stuff at the time. And definitely a lot of what I knew of the system was a very small subset of what I could do. And as I've been sort of getting to a lot more stuff of the last few years, really it's been sort of what I've been getting into there. So, oops. And so the Super SD system is a really neat add-on. It is expensive if you want to save pennies. Coming from scratch, because I don't have an actual CD-ROM or an interface unit, I'll admit I kind of do want one. It's been really good there because you can just run everything. I can run TurboGrafx versions of games. So even as some of the games here I have out of my stack of HuCards, which I shall slowly bring in, and my stack of HuCards are the Japanese versions for obvious reasons. I can run some of the US versions which do have, stuff in English, so I can actually read them as necessary. But yeah, anyway, so let's go through. What I'll do is, I'll put them up, I'll talk about them, and I'll overlay some footage that I captured so you can just see, if you haven't seen them, what they're like. So first off, we've got 1943 Kai, which is a 1991 release and an adaptation of the sort of remix of Capcom's arcade machine. 1943 Kai remixes 1943 up a little bit. Nice little take. This is a really, really good shooter. It's obviously on the more expensive side of the scale, but definitely one I've really, really enjoyed. It's fast, it's frenetic, it looks good, sounds good. It's got 2-player support. Another reason why I need multi-tap. And a great adaptation of the game. It's definitely prior to Capcom releasing the arcade versions in those compilations in the Capcom Generations series, so PS1, Saturn era. This was really probably the best version of the game you can play at home. It's fast, frenetic, looks great, sounds great. Really good challenge. One definitely I'm a very, very big fan of. So next up is Namco's Final Blaster, which Namco were a pretty good supporter of the PC Engine. I'm looking at my stack of HuCards here, and they've had a fair few on the list. And so this one, I don't know if it has an arcade version. I'm not sure it does. I haven't heard of it beforehand. And I really had it sitting in the stack for a while. I really only sat down to play it the first time I was recording footage, and it's not a bad vertically scrolling shooter. It's it's basically shoot ships, blast stuff, have fun. It's a good version of the game. It's probably one of the weaker games that I've got in my stack here, but I surprisingly did have some fun with it, and I may have to cover that a bit more later on. Oops. And next up we've got Final Lap Twin, which of course Final Lap was sort of a mid-80s release by Namco that sort of kind of evolved the formula of pole position. Final Lap Twin is interesting because you've sort of got that game in there, that sort of split-screen racer that you can have a second player race with. But the bulk of the game is this actual, racing RPG, because late 80s, everything had to be an RPG. And so you start off, it's sort of ranking up from, driving, slower cars to getting into F1. I really want to spend some time with that mode of the game, because it's actually really interesting to do something a bit different than the norms. And then we've got Final Soldier, which is the second of the Soldier series released on the PC Engine. And of course, a lot of people say it's the weaker of the Soldier games. I had a good run of it when I was recording, and I haven't played as much. Admittedly, I've played it less than Superstar Soldier, which I have here. But I found I actually really was enjoying it. Again, it does very much what the Soldier formula does, You scroll, you shoot things, you collect different weapons, and it's solid blasting action. And of course, it's got the caravan mode, so you've got your 2 or 5 minute time attacks in there. for those who are after that kind of fun. I found myself honestly quite enjoying it. Good version, good game in its own right. And one of the best releases I've got is Galaga 88, which is, or some people probably know it as Galaga 90, which is what it was titled in the US for the TurboGrafx release. But of course, Galaga 88 builds upon the formula of original Galaga and just really turns it up to 11 in so many ways. Like, it starts off looking like Galaga just with much fancier visuals, but as you sort of work your way through the game, there's a lot more different. There's like the dimension warps. There's sections where it's sort of vertically scrolling and you're sort of dealing with more complex formations. It takes a lot of the stuff of what Galaga does, turns it up to 11, and is a really great experience. And this is, again, this was the first home version, and I think probably the best way to play it for ages until MAME got support for it. But even now, it's a version of the game that still is really good fun to play. It's a very good conversion and really up there worth playing. And then we've got Gradius, which, Konami's classic shooter brought over. This again is a pretty good version of the game, although it suffers a little bit because the height is a little squished, so you have to scroll up and down for the level extent. It does well. It's a very good conversion of the game. It plays well. It uses the sound capabilities of the hardware in a great way. And if Gradius is a pivotal shooter, and it's a really good version of it here. It's quite well recommended. And then we've got Gunhead, which is sort of that one of the early releases. Is it early? It's 89, so it's not that early. Most people probably know it under its US name, Blazing Lasers, for its TurboGrafx release, and I believe that's what it was released as on the PC Engine CoreGrafx Mini, because of course Gunhead was a movie, and it doesn't, from my understanding, it's a very tangential tie-in, but that doesn't matter. It sort of has a formula similar to the Star Soldiers. It's of course it's by Compile, so you might expect things to be a bit Compile-ish as well. And I know some people don't like the length of the stages. It's actually a pretty good shooter. And I think this is what pushed me over the edge. I remember playing this at PAX, and it's sort of what pushed me over the edge. Like, I really should just get a PC Engine. A very, very solid shooter. I think, I know opinions are a bit divided on that one, but I definitely have a lot of fun with it. Then we've got T-47, the Freedom Fighter, which is, of course, another arcade conversion. No surprise there. And it's probably, I would say this is probably the weakest game I've got in the collection so far. Because it sort of feels kind of generic. It's kind of sort of a straightforward horizontal shooter. It doesn't really, it doesn't really offer complex taxing waves. It doesn't really offer anything unique. It's sort of a bit meh, and the difficulty's a bit rough. It's an okay game, but it's definitely the weakest of what I've got in the stack here. More arcade goodness, we've got, of course, Space Invaders, which you might think it's Space Invaders, so meh. And so it's got two modes. It's got a mode which is basically just classic Space Invaders, and it's a pretty solid version of it. It simulates the color strips on screen. It does all of that stuff. But there's the plus version, and this one is a bigger remix of the game. It's actually, that whilst it keeps things fairly simple, really does introduce a few new mechanics. There's power-ups, there's sort of different attack waves and things like that. It's not quite up there with what you'd see with, say, Super Space Invaders, and some later takes on the formula, but it's an alright version of Space Invaders, and the plus version actually makes it stand out quite a bit. Hopefully, one of these worth checking out for sure. Then we've got good old Superstar Soldier, which is probably one of those early ones that really sort of sold what the machine could do in terms of the shooting competition. Superstar Soldier is, of course, one of the Caravan games as well, so you've got your 2 and 5 minute timers, and it's one of those ones that's really worth putting on and just having a great old blast with. It's a game that I really have a lot of fun with. It's a great technical shooter, quite up there, sort of learning how to, balance which of the weapons you want to keep using and things like that. Great release, and it's well worth checking out. Almost at the bottom of the pile now, thankfully, and we've got Victory Run, which is basically, being that this is number 3. I love that Hudson used to used to do that for the car releases, is pretty much launch window, and is essentially, I feel like it's their early attempt at trying to take on Outrun, as Victory Run has you doing the Paris to Dakar rally, and so you go through each stage. You've got to try and complete each stage before you run out of time, or sort of eat too much of your time debit, if you will. But when you start the rally, you've got to sit there and pick your spare parts, and as you race, you'll damage your car. You've got your tyres, your engine, your gearing, your suspension, and so between stages you'll have to repair them, but you've only got the stack of parts that you bring with you. So when starting the game, you've sort of got to go, what should I pack to make sure that you can get through the rally okay? It's a very fun race. It's a little, the perspective is a little low on the ground compared to some other stuff, but it's early days on the machine, and I think that the result is still makes for a game that's fun and challenging in various ways. And second to last, the penultimate game we've got here is, of course, Volfied, the sort of successor, if you will, to Kicks, Taito's classic arcade game. Yeah, and it plays much like Kicks, as you'd expect. You patrol the play field, cut into, claim the percentage. It's like, I think it's 80%. But there's a few little interesting things. The main enemy in each stage is far more interesting than the pattern of lines in Kicks, because if you're one of those things that it does is if you can slowly trap it in, it'll start getting smaller. And as that starts getting smaller, it means you can trap more area and claim more area and try and earn that bigger bonus. There's a lot of a risk-reward play in Volfied. There's also power-ups and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's like that classic formula taken up to the next stage. And it's a pretty good conversion of the game. I mean, I really enjoyed... I covered the C64 version on the channel quite a few years ago, and that was a really good version of the game, and this is as well. It's well worth checking out. And last but not least, we have Xevious Falgrat Saga. I think that's what the subtitle is. I may have gotten myself confused. Anyway, this is particularly, if you remember the video I did some time ago on bunch of the home conversions of Xevious, and I talked about the MSX2 version. This is kind of a successor of sorts to that. Again, it's got the two modes. It's got one mode which is a really good version of original arcade Xevious. It plays just like the arcade game. It's up there. It's a really crisp conversion, solid. But then the second mode, it has the second mode as well, but this plays out a little differently. It's sort of a bit more of a story to it. Sadly, there isn't an English translation, so I don't know the story. And you sort of slowly get through power-ups and stuff like that. It's actually quite a nice little version of the game. And I mean, one of the things I learned is that Xevious, I didn't realise that Xevious was really big in Japan during the day. And that's why there are a lot of the enhanced versions on various Japanese systems. This is a great, it looks great, sounds great, plays well. Of course, it was handled by Compile, as was the MSX2 version of the game, so it's done really well, and it's strongly recommended. One of the absolute standouts I think I've got in the collection. And so there we have it. The PC Engine is a system I don't have a big library for. I'm sort of slowly working on that as I can, trying to find some interesting games at reasonable prices and playing. And that's why I like having the SD system on board as well, because I can sit there and just browse through some stuff randomly, and especially, knowing, like, as much as I want to get the original interface unit, because the briefcase, because it looks cool with the console, and then the CD drive next to it, the problem being, of course, is that they are kind of, loads of gear problems and stuff, and they're looking at what they cost, they do tend to cost a fair bit. And so it's a hard decision to want to go for. And so, at least with the SD system, I can just play the CD images on the card. And I think I'll wrap it up there. It's not a big collection of games, I'll admit, but there's a lot of good ones here. And it's a system, as I've said, the PC Engine is a system I've really been enjoying. And it's I love its compact size. I love it. I love a HuCard. Like, let's go through and just, like I love it. I love how tiny a HuCard is. I love all that stuff about them. They're a great system. And whilst, I'll admit, collecting for them can sort of get up there in terms of price, like some point, still some stuff I really enjoy. And as I said, from there, I think I'll wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this different look at just a little aspect of part of my collection of stuff. Let me know if you'd like to see more on some of the other systems. I can imagine what everyone wants to see, but that's not going to be something feasible I can do in a little bit of desk space. But I definitely could show off some other systems that I do have and talk about a bit. If you haven't already, please click the thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought. Again, I'd like to know if something like this with some of the other systems I have would be worth looking at. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. It helps, help and turn on the bell so you get notified as videos come out. If there's plenty of other things you want to do to help the channel, Patreon, is basically acts as a tip jar and you get early access and to other bits and pieces. But most importantly, thank you all so very much for taking the time out to check this video out. I will catch you on the next one.